They thought it was just a joke, a cheap bet after hours. They dared him, a quiet single father, to sleep with his own boss. They thought he would panic. They thought he would go silent. They thought he would disappear like he always did. But when Daniel Brooks knocked on Evelyn Carter's office door and told her the truth, she didn't get angry. She didn't fire him. She didn't flinch. She just smiled and said 5 words that flipped everything. "About time you showed up." Daniel Brooks arrived at the Harrington and Cole office every morning at 7:45. Not 7:30. Not 8. 7:45. He clocked in, walked to his desk in the back corner of the sustainability consulting floor, and opened his laptop without speaking to anyone. His coffee was black. His shirt was pressed. His posture said, "I am here to work, not to be seen." The routine was deliberate. Daniel had learned long ago that consistency made you invisible. People noticed disruption, not repetition. So he disrupted nothing. He arrived at the same time, parked in the same spot when he could, ate lunch at his desk, left at 3:15 sharp. No variation. No deviation. Just a steady, unremarkable pattern that made him part of the background. At 35, Daniel had mastered the art of being invisible. He wasn't rude. He wasn't cold. He simply didn't engage beyond what was necessary. When colleagues invited him to lunch, he declined politely. When they asked about his weekend, he answered in 4 words or less. When they stopped asking, he didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and he was just relieved. The office itself was everything Daniel was not. Sleek glass walls, polished marble floors, people who smiled too wide and laughed too loud. Harrington and Cole specialized in environmental impact assessments for corporate clients, which meant the work was technical, the deadlines were brutal, and the egos were massive. The firm occupied 3 floors of a midtown high-rise, and every square foot of it screamed success. Expensive art on the walls, fresh flowers in the lobby, conference rooms named after national parks, which Daniel found grimly ironic given how little time anyone spent outdoors. Daniel liked the work. He did not like the people. Most of them, anyway. They were smart, sure. Educated, credentialed, but they wore their intelligence like armor, and they used it to cut each other down. Every conversation was a performance. Every meeting was a battle for dominance. Daniel didn't have the energy for it. He had learned to nod at the right moments, stay quiet when opinions clashed, and never, ever volunteer information about his personal life. He kept his head down. He delivered reports on time. He never missed a meeting, never asked for extensions, never caused problems. And in return, the office gave him what he wanted most, to be left alone. He had a daughter to pick up at 3:30. He had groceries to buy, homework to check, bedtime stories to read. He didn't have time for office politics or networking events or drinks after work. His priorities were clear, and Harrington and Cole was not one of them. So when people at Harrington and Cole thought of Daniel Brooks, they barely thought of him at all. He was the guy in the corner, the contractor who showed up, did his job, and left. Unremarkable, forgettable, safe. That was exactly how Daniel wanted it. Because the alternative, being seen, being known, being vulnerable, was too dangerous. He'd tried that once. It hadn't ended well. So now he kept his distance. And if that meant being lonely, well, he'd been lonely before. Every afternoon at 3:30, Daniel stood outside Riverside Elementary with the other parents. He checked his watch. He scanned the doors. And when Lily came running out, backpack bouncing, hair flying, he felt the tightness in his chest ease just a little. This was the moment that made everything else worth it. The spreadsheets, the silence, the careful invisibility. All of it faded when Lily smiled. "Dad!" She threw her arms around his waist. 8 years old, all energy and questions. "Can we get ice cream?" Daniel lifted her backpack off her shoulders, slinging it over his own. "Not today, kiddo. We've got chicken in the fridge." "You always say that, because it's always true." He ruffled her hair. "Come on, tell me about your day." They walked to the car, and Lily talked the entire way. She talked about her science project on volcanoes. She talked about the boy who ate paste and had to go to the nurse. She talked about the substitute teacher who let them watch a documentary about penguins. Daniel listened to every word. He asked follow-up questions. He laughed when she did the voices. This was the part of his day that mattered, not the reports, not the deadlines. This. In the car, Lily buckled herself in and looked at him with those wide, serious eyes she got when she was thinking hard about something. Daniel recognized that look. It was the same one her mother used to have, the one that meant a difficult question was coming. "Dad, why don't you ever tell me about your work?" Daniel paused, hand on the ignition. "What do you mean? You ask me about school every day, but you never talk about your office. What do you do there?" He started the engine, buying himself a moment. "My work's boring, Lil. Numbers and reports. Nothing as exciting as paste-eating kids." She frowned. "But you're there all the time. Like, every day. There has to be something interesting." Daniel pulled out of the parking lot. "Do you have friends there?" The question caught him off guard. "Not really. I mostly work alone." That sounds lonely. It was. But Daniel wasn't about to say that. "I'm not there to make friends. I'm there so we can have a roof over our heads. That's all." Lily looked out the window. Daniel knew that look too. She was filing the conversation away, the way she always did when she didn't believe him but didn't want to push. She was too smart for her own good, and she was the reason Daniel couldn't afford to mess up. Not at work, not anywhere. Lily deserved stability. She deserved a father who showed up, who kept his promises, who didn't fall apart when things got hard. Her mother had left when Lily was 3, just packed a bag one morning and walked out. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. Daniel had spent 5 years making sure Lily never felt abandoned again. And if that meant being invisible at the office, swallowing his pride, enduring whatever Mark Sullivan threw at him, then that's what Daniel would do, because Lily came first. Always. Evelyn Carter didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. She walked in, and conversations stopped. Not because she demanded it, because people instinctively understood that when Evelyn spoke, you listened. At 42, she was the youngest senior partner Harrington and Cole had ever appointed. She had built her reputation on precision, fairness, and an almost unnerving ability to read people. She could walk into a client meeting and know within 5 minutes who was lying, who was competent, and who was about to become a problem. Her office was on the top floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Minimalist furniture, a glass desk, 2 leather chairs, a single bookshelf lined with industry journals and legal texts. No clutter, no personal items except for one. A photograph on her desk of her and her late father, standing in front of the Golden Gate Bridge. She didn't talk about him often. She didn't need to. Everyone knew the story. He'd been a civil engineer. He'd taught her that work was a promise you kept to yourself before you kept it to anyone else. That integrity wasn't negotiable. That you built things to last, or you didn't build them at all. Evelyn had taken those lessons to heart. She didn't cut corners. She didn't play politics. She didn't tolerate incompetence or dishonesty. It made her respected. It also made her isolated. People admired her from a distance, but few actually knew her. She preferred it that way. Relationships were complicated. Work was simple. You did the job well, or you didn't do it at all. Evelyn noticed things. She noticed when people cut corners. She noticed when they lied, even small lies. She noticed when they were afraid to speak up. And she noticed Daniel Brooks. He was different from the others. He didn't schmooze. He didn't politic. He didn't try to impress her or anyone else. He just worked. Every report he submitted was thorough, meticulous, error-free. Every analysis was backed by data, and every day at 3:15, he packed up his things and left. Not because he was lazy, because he had somewhere to be, someone waiting for him. She respected that. In an office full of people desperate to be seen, Daniel Brooks seemed content to disappear. It was rare, and Evelyn had learned to pay attention to rare things. She didn't know much about his life outside the office. She knew he was a contractor, not permanent staff. She knew he had a daughter. She'd seen the drawing taped to his monitor once, a crayon stick figure labeled Dad with a bright yellow sun in the corner. But she didn't pry. If Daniel wanted to keep his life private, that was his business. Still, she watched. Not in a creepy way. In the way a good leader watches her team. She watched how people treated him. The small slights, the exclusions. The way Mark Sullivan talked over him in meetings or dismissed his suggestions without consideration. She saw it all, and she made note of it. Because Evelyn Carter believed in fairness, and what was happening to Daniel Brooks wasn't fair. She just needed proof before she could act. Proof came slowly, but it always came eventually. Mark Sullivan had been at Harrington and Cole for 12 years. He liked to remind people of that fact. Often. Mark was the kind of man who treated seniority like a weapon. He had opinions about everything, and respect for very little. At 48, he'd plateaued. He wasn't going to make partner. He knew it. Everyone knew it, and that made him dangerous. Because Mark Sullivan had stopped trying to climb the ladder. Now he just pulled other people down. And for reasons Daniel couldn't quite pin down, Mark had decided Daniel was worth tormenting. It started small. A comment here, a question there. "Brooks, you leaving already? Must be nice to work part-time hours." "Brooks, you ever actually stay for a team meeting, or is that beneath you?" "Brooks, maybe if you networked a little, you'd stop being a contractor and get a real job." The words were delivered with a smile. That made them worse, because if Daniel pushed back, he'd be the one who looked unreasonable. He'd be the one making a big deal out of nothing, so Daniel didn't push back. He nodded. He stayed quiet. He absorbed the small cuts and kept moving. But Mark didn't stop. He escalated. He left Daniel out of email chains on projects Daniel was supposed to be part of. He scheduled meetings at 3 o'clock, knowing Daniel would have to leave early, then complained that Daniel wasn't committed to the team. He took credit for Daniel's work in client presentations, reframing Daniel's analysis as his own insight. The worst part? No one said anything. People heard Mark's comments. They saw what he was doing, but they looked away because Mark was senior. Mark had connections with founding partners. Mark was the kind of person you didn't cross if you wanted to keep your job. Daniel understood that. He didn't like it, but he understood it. Offices had hierarchies, and Daniel was at the bottom. Contractors always were. So he endured. He swallowed the insults. He redid work that Mark claimed wasn't good enough, even when it was. He stayed late when he could arrange childcare, just to prove he was committed, but it was never enough. Mark always found something to criticize, and Daniel always felt like he was one mistake away from losing everything. For Lily, for the paycheck, for the stability he couldn't afford to lose. That's what kept Daniel quiet. Not fear. Responsibility. It happened on a Thursday. Late. Most of the office had cleared out, but a handful of people lingered near the break room. Mark Sullivan. 2 junior analysts whose names Daniel could never remember. A project manager named Chloe who laughed too loud at everything, Mark said. Daniel was packing up his desk, eyes on the clock. 3 minutes. 3 minutes and he could leave. 3 minutes and he'd be in the car, driving to Lily's school, leaving this place behind for another day. "Brooks, come here." Mark's voice, loud, commanding. Daniel hesitated. He had 3 minutes. Less than 3 minutes now. But ignoring Mark would only make things worse. Tomorrow would be worse. Next week would be worse. So Daniel walked over. "Yeah?" Mark leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, grin spreading across his face. "We're taking bets. What's the one thing Brooks here would never do?" The others laughed. Daniel didn't. "I don't have time for this, Mark." "Come on, just a little fun. You're so serious all the time. Don't you ever loosen up?" Daniel turned to leave. He was done. He didn't have to stand here and be their entertainment, sleep with Evelyn Carter. The room went silent. Daniel stopped. He turned around slowly. Mark's grin widened. "You heard me. I dare you to sleep with the boss." Cold, untouchable Evelyn Carter. Ice Queen herself. Bet you couldn't even get her to look at you twice. Hell, I bet you've never even had a real conversation with her. Chloe laughed nervously. One of the analysts shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. But no one told Mark to stop. No one said this was crossing a line. They just watched, waiting to see what Daniel would do. Daniel's jaw tightened. Heat flooded his face, but not from embarrassment, from anger. Pure, clean anger that he hadn't let himself feel in months. "That's disgusting, Mark, and completely inappropriate." "Oh, relax. It's just a joke. Unless you're too scared?" "I'm not doing this." Daniel turned and walked toward the door. Behind him, Mark's voice followed, louder now. "That's what I thought. Always running home to play daddy. Can't handle a little workplace banter." Daniel didn't respond. He left the building, got in his car, and drove to Lily's school. His hands were shaking. Not from anger anymore. From something worse. Humiliation, shame, because Mark was right about one thing. Daniel always walked away. He always let it slide. He swallowed the insults, absorbed the disrespect, and kept his head down. And part of him hated himself for it. But what else could he do? Fight back and lose his job? He couldn't afford that. Lily couldn't afford that. So, he swallowed it. Like he always did. What Daniel didn't know was that Mark had recorded the whole thing. A voice memo on his phone started the moment Daniel walked over. Insurance, Mark called it. Leverage. Because men like Mark Sullivan didn't take chances. They stacked the deck. They made sure they always had the upper hand. And now Mark had Daniel exactly where he wanted him. Trapped. Powerless. Afraid. Friday morning, Daniel arrived at 7:45. Same as always. Same routine. Same coffee. Same quiet walk to his desk. But when he sat down, there was an envelope waiting for him. Plain white. No label. No return address. Just his name printed on the front in block letters. Daniel's stomach tightened. He knew before he opened it. This was from Mark. Inside was a printed transcript of the conversation from the night before. Every word. Every pause. Including the dare. Including his refusal. Including Mark's final comment about playing daddy. And at the bottom, a handwritten note in Mark's familiar scrawl. Just so we're clear. You say anything to HR, this goes public. Your choice. Daniel stared at the paper. His hands went cold. Mark had weaponized his own decency. If Daniel reported him, Mark would twist the story. Make it look like Daniel had been the one making inappropriate comments about Evelyn. It didn't matter that Daniel had refused. All that mattered was the optics. A single father. A female boss. A recording that could be edited, taken out of context, spun into whatever narrative Mark wanted. Daniel would lose. He knew it. Mark knew it. That's why Mark had left the envelope on Daniel's desk instead of confronting him directly. This wasn't about winning an argument. This was about control. About making Daniel understand that he had no power here. That Mark could destroy him any time he wanted. and there was nothing Daniel could do about it. For the rest of the day, Daniel worked on autopilot. He answered emails without reading them carefully. He updated spreadsheets without checking his formulas. He sat through a meeting and couldn't remember a single thing anyone said. His mind was somewhere else, running through scenarios, calculating risks, trying to find a way out. There wasn't one. Every path led to the same place: losing his job, losing his income, losing the stability Lily needed. That night, after Lily went to bed after the bedtime story, after the glass of water, after the third request for one more hug, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee he didn't drink. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. He thought about his options. He could stay silent, let Mark win, keep his head down and hope it blew over. But what if it didn't? What if Mark kept pushing? What if the next dare was worse? What if this was just the beginning? Or he could fight back. Go to HR, tell them everything. But HR would ask questions. They'd want proof. And all Daniel had was his word against Mark's recording. A recording that, edited properly, could make Daniel look like the aggressor. HR would have to investigate. And during that investigation, Daniel would be sidelined, possibly suspended. He couldn't afford that. Not financially. Not emotionally. Lily was already asking why he seemed so tired lately. What would he tell her if he lost his job? There was a third option. One he didn't want to consider but couldn't ignore. He could tell Evelyn. Not as a complaint. Not as a formal report. Just as the truth. Let her decide what to do with it. It was a gamble. The biggest gamble of his professional life. She might fire him for even being involved in such a conversation. She might think he was trying to manipulate her, gain sympathy, play victim. Or she might understand. She might see Mark for what he really was. Daniel didn't know which was more terrifying. The risk of losing everything, or the possibility that someone might actually believe him. Because if she believed him and nothing changed, then Daniel would know for certain that even doing the right thing wasn't enough. Monday morning. Daniel didn't go to his desk. He went straight to the top floor, to Evelyn Carter's office. Her assistant looked surprised. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I need 5 minutes." "She's in a meeting. Please, it's important." The assistant hesitated, then picked up the phone. A moment later, she nodded. "She'll see you. But make it quick." Daniel walked into Evelyn's office. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, looking out at the city. She didn't turn around. "You've been here 3 years, Daniel. This is the first time you've ever asked to see me. So, whatever this is, it must matter." Daniel closed the door. "It does." Evelyn turned. Her expression was calm, unreadable. "Go on." Daniel took a breath. "Last Thursday, Mark Sullivan dared me to sleep with you. In front of other employees. I refused. But he recorded it, and now he's using it as leverage to keep me quiet." He paused. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I just thought you should know." Silence. Evelyn didn't blink, didn't flinch. She just looked at him. For 5 seconds. 10. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He'd made a mistake. He should have stayed quiet. He should have. "How long has Mark been targeting you?" Her voice was even. "Clinical." Daniel blinked. "What? How long?" 6 months. Maybe more. Evelyn walked to her desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. She set it in front of Daniel. Inside were printed emails, messages, reports, all from Mark Sullivan, all flagged. "I've been watching him," Evelyn said. "He's a problem, has been for years. But he's careful. He knows how to stay just inside the line, until now." She looked at Daniel. "You're not the first person he's targeted, but you're the first person brave enough to tell me." Daniel stared at the folder. "You knew?" "I suspected, but I needed proof." and now I have it." She closed the folder. "Thank you for coming to me. That took guts." Daniel didn't know what to say. He'd expected anger, dismissal, maybe even termination. Not this, not belief. "What happens now?" he asked. Evelyn's expression hardened. "Now? We fix this." Mark Sullivan didn't wait. The next day, he filed a formal complaint with HR. The subject line: inappropriate behavior by contractor Daniel Brooks. The complaint alleged that Daniel had made unwanted advances toward a senior partner and had created a hostile work environment. It was a preemptive strike. Mark knew Daniel had talked to Evelyn, so he moved first. Wednesday afternoon, Daniel was called into an HR conference room. Two representatives sat across from him: Margaret Cole, head of HR, and James Harrington, one of the founding partners. Both looked serious. "Mr. Brooks," Margaret began, "we've received a complaint regarding your conduct, specifically allegations that you made inappropriate comments about Miss Carter." Daniel's throat tightened. "That's not what happened." "Then tell us what did happen," Daniel explained. "The dare, Mark's recording, the threat." He kept his voice steady. Factual, but he could see it in their faces. They didn't know who to believe. Margaret took notes. James leaned back in his chair, frowning. "Do you have proof of any of this?" Daniel shook his head. "Just my word. And Mr. Sullivan has a recording that suggests otherwise. He edited it. He took out the part where he was the one who—" The door opened. Evelyn Carter walked in. Margaret looked up, startled. "Miss Carter, this is a closed—" "I'm aware," Evelyn said. She set a USB drive on the table. "But you're going to want to hear this." She looked at Daniel. "I had building security pull the footage from Thursday night. Audio and video, full conversation, unedited." Margaret picked up the drive, plugged it into her laptop, pressed play. For 3 minutes, the room was silent except for the sound of Mark's voice. The dare, the laughter, Daniel's refusal, and then, at the end, Mark's parting shot, always running home to play daddy. When it finished, James Harrington stood. "I'll handle this." He walked out. Margaret looked at Daniel. "You're free to go, Mr. Brooks. We'll be in touch." By Friday, Mark Sullivan was gone. Not fired officially, he'd resigned to pursue other opportunities. But everyone knew. Word spread fast in offices like Harrington and Cole. And with Mark's departure came a new problem. Attention. People looked at Daniel differently now. Some with respect, some with curiosity, a few with suspicion. The invisible man had become visible, and Daniel hated it. Worse, HR wanted to review his relationship with Evelyn Carter, not because they thought anything inappropriate had happened, but because optics mattered. A senior partner defending a contractor looked like favoritism. It didn't matter that Evelyn had done the right thing. It mattered that people were talking. So Evelyn made a choice. She recused herself from any decisions involving Daniel's contract. She stopped attending meetings where he presented. She created distance. Professional. Clean. Safe. Daniel understood. But it still stung, because for a brief moment he'd felt like someone had his back, and now that person was gone. Not because she wanted to be, because she had to be. That was the cost of telling the truth. You won, but you lost something too. One evening, Daniel stayed late to finish a report. The office was empty. Or so he thought. When he looked up, Evelyn was standing by his desk. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I know." She didn't move. "I wanted to say thank you for trusting me. I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice, Daniel. You chose to do the hard thing. Not everyone does." She paused. "Your contract's up in 2 months. If you want to stay, I'll make sure you get a fair review. But if you want to leave, I'll understand. No hard feelings. Daniel looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, he saw past the polished exterior. She was tired, frustrated, maybe even a little lonely. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Evelyn smiled faintly. "I want you to do what's best for your daughter. Everything else is just noise." Daniel didn't renew his contract, not because he was angry, not because he was scared, but because Lily was getting older, and she needed him present, fully present, not half-focused on a job that drained him. He found work with a smaller environmental consulting firm across town. Less prestige, less pay, but better hours, better culture, and a boss who actually remembered his daughter's name. And every afternoon at 3:30, he was there at Riverside Elementary, waiting. Mark Sullivan resurfaced 6 months later. Different company, same attitude, same patterns. But this time, someone spoke up. A junior analyst who'd worked at Harrington and Cole, who'd been in that break room, who'd heard what Mark said, who decided not to stay silent. She filed a complaint her first week. Mark didn't last long. Turned out, reputations followed you, even when you tried to outrun them. As for Evelyn, she stayed at Harrington and Cole, promoted 2 women to senior partner within a year, restructured HR with an emphasis on contractor protections, made it clear that behavior like Mark's wouldn't be tolerated. The culture didn't change overnight, but it started to shift. Slowly, one decision at a time, one voice at a time. 3 months after Daniel left, he got a text from an unknown number. "Coffee? My treat." He didn't need to ask who it was. They met at a cafe halfway between their offices. Neutral ground, no power dynamics, no HR watching. Just 2 people who'd survived something ugly and come out the other side. Evelyn ordered a latte. Daniel ordered black coffee. They talked about work, about life, about everything except what had happened. Because they didn't need to talk about it. They'd lived it. Finally, Evelyn set down her cup. "How's Lily?" Daniel smiled. "Good, really good. She's doing a project on solar energy." "That's great." She asked me about my old job. I told her I used to work with some really smart people, and one of them taught me that doing the right thing is more important than keeping the peace. Evelyn smiled. "The real one, not the professional version." "That's a good lesson." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Daniel stood to leave. He had to pick up Lily. Evelyn walked him to the door. "You know, you were right to walk away. But I'm glad you didn't stay invisible." Daniel paused. "Turns out, being seen isn't so bad, when you're seen by the right people." "No," Evelyn said. "It's not." They parted ways. No promises, no plans. Just the quiet understanding that some doors stayed open, even when you walked away from them. Daniel drove home, picked up Lily from school. She climbed into the car and immediately launched into a story about whales. Daniel listened to every word. And when she paused and asked, "How was your day, Dad?" he didn't give his usual one-word answer. "It was good, Lil, really good. I had coffee with an old colleague, someone I respect, and we talked about how important it is to speak up when something's wrong, even when it's scary." Lily looked at him seriously. "Did you speak up about something?" "I did. A while ago." "Were you scared? Terrified? But you did it anyway?" "Yeah. I did it anyway." Lily nodded. "That's brave, Dad." Daniel ruffled her hair. "Thanks, kiddo. Now tell me more about these whales." And as Lily talked about humpbacks and migration patterns, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The quiet knowledge that he'd done right by his daughter, not by showing her a perfect life, but by showing her that when you're knocked down, you get back up. When you're treated unfairly, you speak truth. When you're afraid, you act anyway. That's what it means to be a father. Not to be invincible. Just to be present. Daniel Brooks was no longer invisible, and for the first time in his life, he was okay with that. Because being seen meant being vulnerable, but it also meant being real.